The legendary actor known for his rugged cowboy roles faced a conclusion to his life that was much more melancholic than any character he portrayed on film. Glenn Ford, the iconic star of westerns who captivated viewers for many years, lived his last days in isolation, distant from the glamour of Tinseltown. Nowadays, his deserted mansion remains unchanged, preserving echoes of an existence brimming with success, sorrow, and hidden truths. And upon his demise, the reality of his remaining wealth astonished all. When Glenn Ford stepped away from the movie industry in 1991, he had already devoted over 5 decades to the spotlight, establishing himself as one of cinema's most reliable and adaptable leading figures. He retired at age 75, not due to waning passion for his craft, but because his physical condition started requiring greater focus. Decades of grueling filming timetables, coupled with the inevitable effects of growing older, resulted in cardiac and vascular issues that hindered his ability to sustain the energy needed for productions. During discussions from that era, Ford admitted he had driven himself relentlessly throughout his profession, frequently handling several projects annually during his peak. His dedication was renowned, yet in his twilight years, that ambition yielded to health necessities. Although he stayed intellectually alert and kept his charisma and humor, his physique could no longer match the rigors of performing. His choice to withdraw was thoughtful, enabling him to prioritize recovery, treatments, and leisure free from the unyielding demands of show business. Regrettably, Ford's well-being deteriorated further during the 1990s and into the new millennium. He experienced multiple small cerebrovascular incidents that rendered him bodily diminished and progressively vulnerable. Acquaintances observed that although these events spared his cognitive sharpness, they restricted his movement and increased his reliance on assistance. Outings in public grew infrequent, and on those occasions, he was typically supported by helpers or trusted companions who aided him in managing his declining state. In spite of his mobility constraints, Ford stayed in his Beverly Hills abode, where he had long kept a cozy and secluded dwelling. This property acted as a haven in those times, a spot for welcoming guests, exchanging letters with former associates, and reminiscing about an extraordinary profession that crossed eras of film history. He stayed connected to a tight-knit group of pals and held on to curiosity about news, movies, and the paths of emerging performers he respected. As time progressed, Ford's vitality became even more delicate. Though he shunned extended medical facility visits when feasible, opting for the comfort of home, his capacity for joining social events lessened. Accounts indicate he devoted considerable hours at his residence in serene contemplation, sometimes rewatching his classic movies and keepsakes. Individuals familiar with him during this phase described his persistent poise and elegance, despite the burdens of maturity and ailment. On the 30th of August in 2006, Glenn Ford departed this world calmly at his Beverly Hills estate at 90 years old. His passing signified the closure of an extensive and notable journey, one that witnessed his ascent from a youthful immigrant from Canada to a highly esteemed celebrity of cinema's prime period. Announcements of his death elicited homages from performers, filmmakers, and admirers globally, many highlighting not merely his portfolio of roles, but his expertise, modesty, and kindness. What might surpass the intrigue of Glenn Ford's passing? It's his concealed personal affairs. Glenn Ford's sole lawful union was with the renowned performer and choreographer Eleanor Powell. They tied the knot in 1943, at a moment when Powell's fame outshone Ford's significantly. Eleanor Powell ranked among cinema's top dancers in the 1930s and initial 1940s. Famous for her spectacular tap sequences and captivating aura in song and dance features, she drew massive crowds and was a familiar figure, especially through her MGM collaborations, where her vigorous and athletic moves distinguished her from peers. Conversely, Glenn Ford was still ascending the ranks of stardom. Although he had started forging a sturdy path in the industry, he hadn't yet attained the legendary stature that arrived later via masterpieces like Gilda from 1946 and Blackboard Jungle from 1955. Essentially, Ford was the emerging talent while Powell was an established luminary. This contrast infused their bond with a fascinating equilibrium and strain, both intimately and occupationally. Their partnership yielded one offspring, Peter Ford, arriving in 1945. Peter later pursued a similar route in entertainment, developing his own vocation as a thespian and creator. Glenn Ford and Eleanor Powell additionally collaborated on camera in an uncommon joint venture during the 1950s. They featured together in a brief production called Have Faith in Our Children, an endeavor that lingers as an odd side note in their professions. It was a humble project, yet significant for merging their actual partnership into a work setting, if only momentarily. Notwithstanding their apparently enchanting alliance, the bond between Ford and Powell wasn't fated to endure. In 1959, following 16 years, they separated legally. Although the exact causes for the split weren't broadly disclosed, the pressures of celebrity existence, individual disparities, and Ford's intricate amorous entanglements probably contributed. Eleanor Powell withdrew from performing and dancing soon after the dissolution, largely retreating from visibility. Their child, Peter, stayed bonded to his dad amid the upheaval. Glenn Ford's romantic endeavors were infamously intricate, if not downright controversial for his time. Post-divorce from Powell, Ford's notoriety as a prolific seducer emerged in industry whispers and scandal sheets. He was broadly recognized for his love adventures, frequently involving numerous co-stars concurrently. Among the ladies associated with Ford were several of the most alluring and influential thespians of mid-20th century films. Rita Hayworth, his partner in the 1946 movie Gilda, stood as one of his most prominent companions. The spark they displayed on film mirrored a genuine off-screen pull. Though their connection never led to matrimony, it was common knowledge among insiders. Hayworth, who endured a tangled private existence with various unions, apparently engaged in a fervent romance with Ford amid and following Gilda's production. Their involvement fueled much rumor, and their memorable cinematic duo endures as legendary. Maria Schell, a skilled Austrian artist with a notable footprint in American and continental cinema, was another linked to Ford romantically. Geraldine Brooks, acclaimed for her theatrical and cinematic contributions in the 1940s and 1950s, likewise shared a liaison with Ford. He was reported to have connections with Stella Stevens, a captivating blonde who rose as a sensual icon and celebrity in the 1960s, and Gloria Graham, lauded for her parts in shadowy thrillers. Gene Tierney, a prominent figure in works like Laura from 1944, was yet another of Ford's affectionate pursuits. Tierney was revered for her allure and skill, and Ford's dalliance with her expanded his roster of notable flings. Eva Gabor, the elegant Hungarian-American social figure and artist, was also connected to Ford. Eva's sophistication and grace positioned her as a highly desired personality in entertainment society, and her tie with Ford bolstered his persona as someone who drew the elite of the field. Barbara Stanwyck, among cinema's most admired talents with a multi-decade span, also included Ford in her list of paramours at some stage. The specifics of their bond are sparsely recorded, but they contribute another dimension to Ford's affectionate chronicle. A particularly notorious tale about Ford's amorous side involved his short-lived encounter with Marilyn Monroe in 1962. Monroe, by then a colossal symbol of sensuality and fame, was notorious for her stormy private matters. The interlude with Ford was transient, yet it drew notice for involving two of the industry's giants. Though merely a passing moment, it emphasized Ford's ongoing appeal to major luminaries. Glenn Ford's inclination for amorous bonds stretched back to the 1940s, including a brief romance with Joan Crawford. Crawford, a dominant and authoritative force in the industry, was famed for her determination and intricate male relationships. Her fleeting affair with Ford early on mirrors his enduring fame for allure and persuasion among top-tier professionals. During the mid-1960s, Glenn Ford dated various prominent females, such as Christiane Schmidtmeyer, Linda Christian, and Vicky Dugan. Each brought distinct appeal and essence, enriching Ford's romantic collection in that era. Christiane Schmidtmeyer, a German performer and model who earned acclaim in American films during the 1960s, possessed an exotic continental charm that aligned with Ford's seasoned, tough charisma. Their bond, though not heavily featured in gossip rags, fit into Ford's habit of linking with artists at key career junctures. Linda Christian was another key figure in Ford's affections. Christian pioneered as a significant Latin American talent in the industry, most remembered for portraying the initial Bond companion in the 1954 adaptation of Casino Royale and her off-camera elegance. Her association with Ford exemplified his pattern of bonding with resilient, captivating women in showbiz. Vicky Dugan, celebrated for her distinctive fashion and labeled the back for her preference for rear-exposing gowns, also featured in Ford's mid-1960s romantic episodes. Dugan's provocative persona matched Ford's sturdy virility, and their short connection enhanced the enigma of Ford's intimate world. Outside these 1960s liaisons, Glenn Ford was associated with an astonishing variety of other famed women. Judy Garland, one of the industry's most cherished icons and a dynamic entertainer, was among those who connected with Ford. Garland's chaotic existence and profound emotions contrasted Ford's consistent screen demeanor, but their trajectories intersected in the whirlwind of cinema's heyday. Connie Stevens, Suzanne Pleshette, and Rhonda Fleming were likewise on Ford's vast affectionate roster. Each contributed her unique spark, Stevens with her vibrant youth and subsequent television renown, Pleshette with her robust dramatic abilities and later humorous parts, and Fleming with her luminous on-film aura, earning her the title Queen of Technicolor. Roberta Collins, Susie Lund, Terry Moore, Angie Dickinson, Debbie Reynolds, Jill St. John, Bridget Bardot, and Loretta Young were additional celebrities who shared closeness with Ford. Angie Dickinson, for example, was a stunning beauty and formidable talent known for her appearances in series and shadowy dramas. Meanwhile, Debbie Reynolds' effervescent appeal and vast expertise made her a lasting symbol, while Bridget Bardot, the French phenomenon and worldwide sensual emblem, infused a continental aspect into Ford's romantic saga, demonstrating his international magnetism and draw. In spite of this storm of affectionate engagements, Ford's intimate sphere also included steadier, though ultimately failed, marital bonds. He wed actress Katherine Hayes in 1966, but their alliance endured only 3 years, concluding in separation by 1969. Hayes was a skilled performer recognized for her small-screen roles, and their matrimony signified a more conventional tie relative to Ford's numerous transient romances. Following Hayes, Ford united with Cynthia Hayward from 1977 until 1984. Although less spotlighted, this partnership also terminated in divorce, perpetuating Ford's struggle with lasting marital commitments. Lastly, Ford's final matrimony was to Jean Baugh from 1993 to 1994, a concise alliance that similarly ended in dissolution. Prior to these unions, Ford maintained a prolonged bond with actress Hope Lange in the early 1960s. Lange, a refined and talented artist, ranked as one of Ford's key companions beyond wedlock, showing that Ford's affectionate history wasn't solely defined by ephemeral encounters, but also by sustained sentimental ties. A fascinating revelation about Glenn Ford's romantic sphere emerges from his son Peter Ford's 2011 book, Glenn Ford, A Life. Per Peter, Glenn Ford's private journals chronicled an astounding 146 romantic involvements with actresses throughout his lifespan. This number highlights the infamous status Ford built as a cinema seducer and enchanter. Within these numerous bonds, one of the most persistent and meaningful was Ford's 40-year sporadic romance with Rita Hayworth. Their connection started in 1945 amid Gilda's filming, a movie that solidified their statuses as industry legends. The on-film synergy between Ford and Hayworth was electrifying, and their real-world passion was equally intense, though multifaceted. Their affair recommenced during the Loves of Carmen in 1948 and persisted intermittently across the following 4 decades. Indeed, Ford's link to Hayworth was so lasting that in 1960, he relocated to a property adjacent to hers in Beverly Hills. This closeness in location mirrored the intimacy and intricacy of their bond, which continued until the early 1980s. Their relationship featured profound fondness alongside the unavoidable frictions of such extended, irregular romantic intricacies. Hayworth herself navigated stormy partnerships, having wed 5 times, yet Ford stayed a steady presence in her world for decades. Besides these romances and wedlocks, Ford became betrothed twice more in his advanced years, initially to Deborah Morris during the 1980s and subsequently to Karen Johnson in the early 1990s. Neither betrothal led to matrimony, but they further exemplify Ford's ongoing search for partnership deep into his later periods. Glenn Ford's off-camera existence was as theatrical and layered as the figures he embodied in films. Beyond his recognized image as a magnetic protagonist and infamous philanderer, there existed a captivating and rather covert element to his private world that few comprehended fully while he lived. One of the most extraordinary aspects was his vast network of sound captures, a confidential repository documenting years of telephone dialogues with stars, companions, and even national leaders. This unusual practice, paired with some of his more publicized affectionate ties, sketches a clear portrait of an individual who existed both under public scrutiny and within a shroud of protected mystery. Among the diverse women Glenn Ford romantically engaged, one surprising figure was Liz Renee. Renee was a performer, dancer, and exotic entertainer who developed a dedicated following later on due to her vibrant journey and candid narratives. In her 1991 autobiography, My First 2,000 Men, Liz Renee allocated a section to Glenn Ford, recounting their romance with frank specifics. She placed Ford among her top 5 finest companions intimately, a daring endorsement of the actor's appeal and alleged expertise in private encounters. Renee's accounts, bold and unrestrained, illuminated a facet of Ford that clashed with his meticulously curated public facade. Her portrayal extended beyond desire and courtship, touching on the authentic fervor and depth of their shared moments. Ford's tie with Renee was merely one chapter in a lifelong sequence of entwinements with females from varied origins, spanning elite performers to those on the edges of celebrity culture. However, while his affectionate sphere was broad and frequently debated, it was the systematic manner in which he preserved records of his connections that proved truly exceptional. For more than 4 decades, Glenn Ford taped each phone discussion he conducted with his famous paramours, acquaintances, and contacts. This comprehensive sound collection wasn't a leisurely pursuit. It was a purposeful and meticulously upheld assemblage. Ford had set up an advanced taping mechanism in his dwelling, an atypical step that mirrored a profound requirement for oversight and caution in his individual matters. The genesis of this setup stemmed from apprehension and suspicion. Ford was especially concerned that his initial spouse, Eleanor Powell, might uncover his plentiful infidelities and abandon him. The tapes encompassed a remarkable assortment of voices from cinema's prime age and afterward. Ford's dialogues included interactions with some of the century's grandest celebrities. Rita Hayworth, with whom he shared a notably tangled and multi-decade romance. Frank Sinatra, the legendary vocalist and thespian famed for his allure and resilient demeanor. William Holden, a peer protagonist and contemporary. John Wayne, the ultimate symbol of American frontier heroism. Cary Grant, whose suave manner rendered him iconic. Ava Gardner, a stunning and dominant talent. Gregory Peck, James Mason, Lucille Ball, James Stewart, Henry Fonda, Angie Dickinson, Joan Crawford, Betty Davis, Charlton Heston, and Debbie Reynolds. This roster resembles a directory of vintage cinema's luminaries. The sheer presence of these recordings forms an astonishing historical artifact, offering a personal and occasionally unpolished view into the confidential exchanges, alliances, dealings, and rumors among cinema's aristocracy. These tapes, if ever comprehensively unveiled or examined, would deliver priceless perspectives on the hidden existences beneath the splendor and crafted images of these icons. The inclusion of two American heads of state, Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan, in the taped voices introduces additional fascination. Ford was recognized for his political engagement and links, and these exchanges with Nixon and Reagan suggest an individual who navigated powerful networks extending well past entertainment. Whether these were informal talks, political debates, or more calculated discussions, they reveal Ford's extensive and profound connections, bridging cinema and governance. Yet, the primary drive for Ford's covert recording routine was intensely personal. His dread that Eleanor Powell would detect his betrayals and dissolve their union prompted him to establish a monitoring setup capable of capturing her calls and those of others nearby. This surveillance act unveiled a man profoundly uncertain about his bonds, despite his external assurance and appeal. It also exposed a shadowy aspect, a touch of distrust and dominance that frequently accompanies intricate private lives. Eleanor Powell did ultimately part ways with Ford in 1959. The formal basis for their separation included infidelity and psychological torment. The various betrayals Ford pursued during their union, combined with the distress from his domineering actions and monitoring, shattered their connection beyond repair. Powell, a celebrity independently and once more prominent than Ford, elected to conclude the partnership instead of suffering the agony of disloyalty and doubt. Intrigued by Glenn Ford's residence? Glenn Ford's ultimate enduring home in Beverly Hills transcends a mere structure. It embodies the essence of the actor's temperament and worldview in his concluding phase. Positioned in one of Los Angeles's most elite districts, the property, frequently cited by addresses like 910 Hartford Way, 901 Oxford Way, or 911 Oxford Way, encapsulates Ford's essence, habits, and perpetual desire for independence. This unique mid-century contemporary dwelling is an uncommon design treasure. Recent publications and design critiques have emphasized its peculiar eight-sided form, a stylistic decision that distinctly differentiates it from standard Beverly Hills abodes. Covering roughly 8,800 square feet, the residence is oddly sparse in one way. It formally includes just a single sleeping chamber. This isn't from scarcity of area, but intentional planning, a vast primary quarters on the ground level that oversees the space. This atypical arrangement reveals much about Glenn Ford's focuses and perspective in his final stretch. Peter Ford, Glenn's descendant, has offered personal understanding of the home's symbolic meaning. For Peter, the eight-sided configuration and the lone expansive sleeping suite were purposeful representations of his dad's character. Glenn Ford was someone who opposed restriction or limitation in body or spirit. The octagon, featuring numerous facets and expansive areas, mirrors Ford's innate craving for liberty and exploration, a kind of structural depiction of his renowned restlessness. The lack of various chambers or enclosed zones implies a wish to evade confinement or categorization, be it in affections, occupation, or personal domain. The mid-century contemporary aesthetic of the dwelling also suits Ford's disposition.